Have you ever wondered what life would be like in a world different from the one we live in today? Usually, people would think this is impossible, but perhaps in the world of quantum mechanics, an extraordinary yet undeniable reality, the idea that our consciousness creates our reality is a natural phenomenon. The brilliant scientist Einstein once said, "The soul that each of us is given is breathed by the same living spirit that powers the universe." In other words, each of our consciousness may operate according to the same laws as the forces that govern the entire universe. This mysterious way of thinking can become clearer by unraveling the mysteries of quantum mechanics. This time, it is human consciousness, evolved from quantum mechanics, a field still not fully understood, that creates reality. This is the story of a mysterious law that may be the most important on YouTube. Good morning, Earth. Hello, I'm Karamaru. Thank you for always following. This time, I want to delve into the laws of the universe, the laws that somehow make wishes come true. After watching this video, I think you'll understand the logic behind the law of gravity and quantum mechanics, as well as why thinking is important. Quantum mechanics is a field of study that investigates the mysterious laws of physics that become clear when we observe matter from a supermicroscopic perspective at the level of fundamental particles. Things and events that we consider to be certain entities are actually a mixture of potential waves that cannot be identified without observation. Surprisingly, very little is known about the uncertainty of matter. The concept of parallel worlds, which developed from this interpretation of the world, is also incredibly interesting. It's the idea that beyond the reality we live in, there exists another world with countless possibilities. If so, there must be a world out there where we can live as the person we want to be. From a quantum mechanics perspective, parallel worlds are supposed to be separated by frequency. Like a television channel changing frequency to show different programs. The remote control you use is choosing which world to watch. I can't do that. We are born without the ability, and there are many reasons why we think so, such as having few successful experiences or being bound by past failures. But from the perspective of the two suns theory, our lives and the lives of those around us are nothing more than the convergence of many different waves of possibility. What is truly determined is the intention of the deterministic law, and in this article, we will delve deeply into the idea that reality may have fewer limitations than we think. This time, I want to talk about the laws of the universe that can be seen from the mysterious properties of fundamental particles in an easily understandable way, while also mentioning the laws of quantum mechanics parallel worlds that Daisuke Muramatsu believes will completely change this phenomenon. So be sure to watch until the end. Let's begin. The wonders of quantum mechanics. Now, everyone, there are events in this world that make you wonder why they happen. For example, even if you've tried many times before without success, at some point things might suddenly start to improve and you might experience a truly miraculous transformation. I think many people wonder what is happening at times like this. Some people may be interested in the occult and spiritual worlds, while others may say that it's just your imagination. But I actually believe that such miraculous phenomena are natural. This is because quantum mechanics, the ultramicroscopic physics, presents a mechanism that supports this. When you learn about quantum mechanics, you are constantly amazed. So, let's start with the most basic thing. The basic premise is that everything in this world, including all matter, is made up of elementary particles. What we think of as solid matter, as a real body, is actually all hollow. No matter how you look at it, this is unreasonable. However, when we break it down to atomic or even subatomic levels, we begin to realize how empty our bodies and all matter are. For example, when we think of an atom, we imagine an atomic structure with electrons surrounding it. That's what an atom looks like, but the surrounding electrons are extremely small compared to the atom as a whole. For example, if an atom were the size of the Earth, an electron would only be about the size of a ripple. There is nothing in the space other than the apple. It's already so empty. In other words, this is all made up of primitive matter, but if more than 99.99% of it is empty, then we can say that this whole thing is a collection of voids. Even though the ground is empty, for some reason we say and go through walls and it hurts when we bump into each other. The The reason is that the negative charges in electrons repel each other. In other words, even though walls in our bodies are full of cavities all over, electrical repulsive forces keep matter hanging down in this hollow state. This force is called the electromagnetic force. That's strange, isn't it? What's even more surprising is that it's not just the masses we see in our bodies, but even emotions and consciousness may be made up of elementary particles. Elementary particles are the smallest units of matter that cannot be divided any further. And in fact, particles of light called photons are one such elementary particle, and it is said that these light particles are constantly emitting from within our bodies. Dr. Albert Popp, a German theoretical biophysicist and researcher in the field, said, "Our bodies emit subatomic particles called biophotons. That is the true nature of our consciousness." It's crazy, but Dr. Popp has diplomas in theoretical physics and biophysics, and is a proper doctor who is good enough to become a university professor, but he is completely different from the conscious mind. In other words, he proposed that consciousness is light. When we feel happy, waves of joy shoot out from our bodies, and when we feel annoyed, waves of annoyance spread all around us. When you think about it, aren't there any phenomena that make sense at night? For example, if the atmosphere around you is tense, you might get irritated too, but conversely, if you're with someone who is really cheerful, you might feel happy. Well, if you are too patient, you might get tired. But in terms of quantum mechanics, this can probably be explained as the result of your own resonance with the photons emitted by the other person. While this may seem like a reasonable guess, what is even more shocking is the behavior of elementary particles. The most famous example is the 20-slit experiment, which was conducted when there was a debate over whether elementary particles of light were particles or waves. When one shot is fired at a board with two holes, one would normally expect the shots to go straight through the two holes and leave two marks on the screen, but instead they create a pattern of extended interference islands, which indicates a phenomenon with wave properties. So to see what was happening, we placed an observation device next to the hole and looked again. And this time it seemed as if the instructor had noticed that he was being watched, because the particles suddenly changed to a pattern that created two trails, which is a characteristic of the particles. The results will be different depending on whether you're watching or not. This is not just because of the usual instrumental influence, but more importantly, it depends on whether humans observe the results. Well, for a more detailed explanation, please check out the previous video. In the end, it's not the influence of the observation equipment that's making the change, but our observations. This way of changing behavior based on human observation sounds like something out of science fiction, but in fact, such results have been obtained many times. When no one is looking, electrons exist as waves, but when someone looks, they transform into particles, just like the game De Rumissangia Quaranta. This phenomenon of particles being determined by one's own observations has led to the bold interpretation that consciousness determines phenomena. In physics, matter is matter and consciousness is consciousness. But quantum mechanics seriously discusses the idea that observation by consciousness can change the state of matter. That is why the idea of becoming who you want to be and making your dreams come true is not just a topic of occultism or mysticism, but is also possible from the standpoint of physics. This is how it has come together and become a hot topic. Well, in a sense, when we are not observing elementary particles, they are waves, so we can think of them as existing in multiples over a wide area. This is true for us, who are made up of elementary particles. In fact, you exist in a wide range of possibilities at the same time, and the moment you set an intention, a corresponding version of you appears. If elementary particles determine what will happen through observation, then humans also spread waves of possibility all over the place, and reality is determined by what we observe. Common sense might suggest that this is ridiculous, but from the perspective of elementary particles, it is common sense. We tend to think that only what we can see is reality, but in reality it is quite imperfect, and it may actually be the invisible things that determine the world. By the way, when it comes to where elementary particles come from, there is a theory that it is a field called the zero-point field. The zero-point field is the source of everything in the world that exists right now in this tiny vacuum area right in front of you. Although there is no definitive proof yet, in the world of physics, the entire universe is attracting attention as a fisherman's sea filled with matter. So, if the zero-point field is the source that gives birth to all elementary particles, then our bodies, emotions, and even aliens that may exist somewhere in the universe are all like brothers who spring from the same field. Einstein believed that each human being is a part of the whole that we call the universe, a part limited by space-time. He said that humans experience themselves as separate from other parts of themselves, but that this is an illusion and that they are being deceived by entitlements. And this can also be interpreted as an allusion to the zero-point field. Now, those of you who have listened to or understood the conditions up to this point may be able to understand from here. One of the important keywords this time, the parallel world, is folded into this zero-point field. Now, here we get to the main topic, living in a parallel world. When you hear the term parallel world, you might think it's a science fiction fantasy. However, if we delve deeper into quantum mechanics, it may even seem more natural to think that other worlds exist simultaneously. The reason is that in the discussion so far, we have seen many absurd aspects, such as the fact that elementary particles cannot be determined unless they are observed, and that they exist in a state where wave possibilities overlap. So where does this overlapping potential actually go? The theory that focuses on this is the interpretation of other worlds, also known as the parallel world hypothesis. So there may be other possibilities that didn't happen in this world unfolding somewhere. This is something that is not familiar in everyday life. But some scholars say that if you interpret physics formulas straightforwardly, there are actually fewer contradictions. I believe that parallel worlds exist. So, the easiest way to imagine where this parallel world is through television signals. Although there were signals from various channels flying around the room, the only channel that was actually displayed was the one we tuned to with the remote control. In the same way, the world is made up of overlapping frequency bodies, and the programs we see change depending on which one we observe. I think that perhaps the world is a reflection of what we observe from within the haze. Well, if we apply this to our consciousness, for example, if we unconsciously choose a negative frequency that says we will fail anyway, then the events of that world will be reflected. Some people may think that they are not choosing such negative things, but if your subconscious or everyday catchphrases tell you that you are bound to get no good, or that only unpleasant things are happening, then there is a good chance that you are already tuning in to bad luck programs. When I press TBS, it feels like I'm also repeatedly pressing the Fuji TV button, which is not good for Fuji TV, but the frequencies are still mixed up. This will result in either outcome and an incomplete outcome. If you do that, you'll be stuck on the same wavelength forever. That's why it's important to be clear about what kind of world you really want. The key here is to think of thread as a physical quantity. The thread has a size, or the amount of energy it can transmit, and the stronger it is, the greater the probability of it being reduced. When you think about people who are successful in the world, you can tell that they have an incredible amount of intention behind them. If you keep making vague observations, thinking that it would be nice if it were possible, but that it is impossible, the results will also be vague. Moreover, the true psychology is still scary. If you are worried about what will happen if you fail, the photon in question will be stronger, and you will likely be heading towards an unsettling development. Of course, it's not as simple as just changing the observation and making any dream come true. However, if we assume that the world war is divided into frequencies, then adjusting our intentions as a way to escape from the world we are in now becomes meaningful. In fact, you decide which world line you will step into without even realizing it. Quantum mechanics suggests such bold possibilities. What people intend and what they observe in the true world varies from person to person, so the parallel worlds will also be different for each person. The people you meet in that world, the opportunities, money, and love you have will also change. As your frequency changes, the person you are with will also change, and the situation will naturally change. In other words, if you have a wish, there is a difference in your fortune depending on whether you wish for it vaguely or with strong intention. In short, the reason you see only bad things may be because you are stuck in a bad frequency body, and if you decide to get out of that state, the events around you will also change. This is the belief in parallel worlds. We are constantly making choices every day without even realizing it. Do we keep pressing the impossible button or the button that chooses interesting possibilities? That's why we often hear the expression that thoughts change reality. It is natural to think that these laws are occult stories, but when you consider the thoughts of people who are actually successful, it begins to seem like there are real laws of the universe involved. This sort of thing, where we don't know why but it just seems that way, is a bit like quantum mechanics. Change your intentions and observations like changing the channel on a TV. That alone can make a big difference in your life. In the world of fishermen, parallel worlds are not entirely Asura, but rather worlds with different frequencies may exist right next to each other. Well, all matter and events in the world are vague waves. If you think about it that way, you might actually be able to manipulate the reality you see now in any way you like. Perhaps people with clear convictions, like the protagonists of manga, are stronger. So let's get more specific here. The world changes in parallel worlds. In our seemingly ordinary daily lives, the situation can suddenly improve as if by magic, or conversely, it can fall apart due to a trivial event, and we sometimes wonder what the trigger is that can cause reality to change so dramatically. Normally, you would think that such a sudden change in the situation is just a coincidence. But if you think about it, it's caused by your everyday thoughts. Looking at this from a quantum mechanical perspective, we can also say that the frequency of the parallel world changed all at once. Daisuke Muramatsu, author of the book The Laws of Parallel Worlds, gives several examples. Please try listening to this while imagining the situation. For example, there is the story of a woman who escaped from a situation that had brought her family to the brink of collapse. The surrounding area is full of opinions and feelings of despair. Furthermore, she continues to blame herself every day, saying that it's all my fault. In this situation, she became ill both mentally and physically, and although she knew that if things continued like this, everything would really go wrong for everyone, she couldn't find a solution. Then one day, I told her how well she had endured, and from that moment on, her family's attitudes began to change somehow, and even her work and money problems began to improve. Why did such a miraculous turn of events occur? If we recall the key phrase we learned earlier, that changing your perception changes the channel, it will start to make sense. Until then, she had been emitting a frequency that told her she was no good and that nothing she did would be of any use. In other words, I was unconsciously tuning in to the worst possible channel. But the moment you observe yourself and realize that you are working hard at your core, you will break away from the waves you were on and switch to a frequency that suggests everything will be okay. Also, the people around you will begin to resonate with those photons, and you will begin to receive unexpected support and cooperation. It's strange how just changing yourself can change the other person. But in the world of elementary particles, waves spread out here and there and influence each other. If you are riding an annoying wave, you will resonate with the other person's annoying particles, making the situation even worse. However, if you change your frequency and choose waves of love and security, the other person will naturally be drawn into that wave. I think this is actually true. Emotions are conveyed to others. In fact, no matter what you say, this simple diagram can have a huge impact on changing relationships with people. In fact, many people say that the moment they grasped their hands and expressed gratitude to the other person, the surroundings change dramatically. A longtime couple can suddenly come to understand each other. Sales can increase several times over. And even just changing the way a tree is held can, from photons' perspective, cause a shift in the flow of fire in all directions. The world you see from there changes completely, as if you had just flipped the channel. It's surprisingly effective for something so simple. One technique that is often mentioned is praising yourself. For example, when we make a mistake, many of us start to criticize ourselves, asking ourselves why we made such a mistake. However, this also strengthens the low frequencies even more. On the other hand, if you can follow up by saying, "No, I've worked hard up to this point, so here's another chance," you can temporarily escape from the wave that is pushing you into a corner. And thanks to that, the technique of conversion is the same. When a relationship breaks down and you feel sad, instead of assuming that it's that person's fault, try to reframe it as an opportunity for you to learn how to connect with people. This will instantly take you to a great program, just like switching screens. If you wonder why this logic works, please remember the basic fact that somnosphere particles change their appearance when observed. Well, even if you hear stories like this and try to change your mind, you may still think that it's impossible. No matter what parallel you are in, there will be times when things don't work out. Once a series of bad things happen, we tend to think even more negatively about ourselves. But that's why the simple technique of seeing ourselves this time as thanks to Nemu can be so devastating. The author says that if someone who used to think that everything was entirely due to something starts to think that everything was entirely thanks to something, they will look like a different person in just 1 month. I'd like to give it a try myself. The more you suffer, the greater the benefits you will experience when you flip the switch yourself. It's similar to how water tastes better when you drink it under the warm sun in the middle of summer. There may be a surprising number of people who use this mechanism unconsciously, even if they are not familiar with quantum mechanics. It is said that highly successful people and happy couples unconsciously have developed the habit of targeting themselves and their partners. If we send out kind waves to each other, it will draw those around us in and make things even more harmonious. It doesn't matter where you start, but if you just try to adjust the waves a little, the world will change in an amazing way. I believe that at the root of this is the theory of parallel worlds taught by quantum mechanics. Now, we have looked at the law of parallel worlds, which states that phenomena can be changed by changing your feelings and frequency. But from here on I would like to think even more deeply about this mysterious, invisible world. The laws of the universe are so interesting. When I think about it objectively and look at it from the perspective of a fisherman, I realize that humans are truly mysterious creatures. When you break down matter, most of it is hollow, and consciousness may actually be something like a particle of light called a photon. But we don't usually think about it, and just go about our lives believing that we are here now. That's not necessarily a bad thing. But if you have questions about where the body and consciousness come from, and where they're going, I think a chronomechanical perspective can give you some clues. For example, there is a theory that consciousness is not just contained in the brain, but actually extends outside the body like a frequency. This may be where the true nature of consciousness lies. Cell biologist Dr. Bruce Lipton said that consciousness is not confined to the brain, but also exchanges information with the external environment. He also said that when forming consciousness, the human brain receives not only the activity within the individual's brain, but also the information and vibrational patterns stored in the field. This also ties into concepts like collective consciousness and quantum fields. In fact, there is a device called Me that measures the very weak magnetic field emitted by the brain inside the head, so it is possible to observe some of the brain's activity leaking out. Perhaps the reason we feel as if our emotions are being transmitted to others is because we are resonating with each other in space. If we think about it that way, it might be more natural to say that our minds and souls are not something inside our bodies, but rather part of the waves that spread across the zero-point field mentioned in the first half. If that's the case, then rather than everything disappearing when we die, we can imagine that even though our body has completed its function and decomposes, our consciousness as photon information may continue to remain in some form. This also makes sense when Einstein says that each human being is just a part of the whole that we call the universe, a part limited by space-time, and that although humans experience themselves as independent of other parts, this is an illusion. In other words, we are all part of the whole. For example, a deceased person appears in a dream. There are many stories of people feeling a call from the bereaved family. It is interesting to think more deeply about the soul here. It sounds very occult, but if souls exist as waves, it may be possible that those left behind can receive them. Of course, there are many mysteries in this world that are difficult to prove, so we cannot make any general tentative statements. The consciousness and souls of people from the past are preserved as waves in this space. But what's interesting here is the lifespan of elementary particles in this world. Most elementary particles have a lifetime in which they disappear in an instant. Meanwhile, the lecturer photon, who is suspected to be the true identity of consciousness, has no lifespan. In other words, photons have the property of remaining infinite, and the true nature of consciousness is said to be photons. If that's the case, then if photons really are consciousness, then consciousness will remain forever. There is a possibility that our consciousness continues to drift somewhere even after death. When you think about it like that, the idea that consciousness may remain forever doesn't seem so far-fetched. When viewed from this perspective, theories about the afterlife and reincarnation don't seem so outlandish after all. He also says that reincarnation may be explained from the perspective of the two children's interpretation of the world. When consciousness returns to the terror point field, which is filled with countless possibilities, including the past and future, someone else will absorb the information stored there in another space-time. This may lead to phenomena such as, "Oh, I have memories from my past life." If that's the case, then it's not a memory of a past life, but rather a random piece of someone else's life. Well, this zero-point field is what is called the higher self in spiritual terms. If one person claims to be the reincarnation of Tokugawa Ie, and another person also claims to be the same Ie, it would be as if multiple people were downloading the same photon information at the same time. Of course, it's not easy to prove that this is true, and you might think, "Here we go again." But don't you think it's at least an interesting perspective that it's not impossible if you think about it from a photo perspective? Furthermore, when I go to temples or shrines, I sometimes get the feeling that my heart is revealed to me. This may also be because waves of prayer have accumulated over the years, creating a perfect environment where you can raise your own wave just by placing yourself there. From the perspective of quantum mechanics, high-frequency bodies fill the space with potions of consciousness that act to transcend the consciousness of those who visit. As a result, you will feel a sense of peace and will naturally begin to re-examine yourself and think about what is important to you at the moment. We tend to think that what we can see is all there is, but it's a romantic but plausible idea that there may actually be many different waves going on in places we can't see. At this point, it seems to make more sense why love and gratitude are said to have high frequencies. Love is a wave so big that it can embrace any and all frequencies and can accept anyone. That is why, when you switch to the wave of love, a force will come into play that will carry away your anger and sadness as well. On the other hand, when you are in a state of anger or anxiety, the world seems small and you have no room to accept people who are trying to get your attention. In the world of fishermen, this means that the wavelengths are disturbed, so even the slightest trigger can easily lead to conflicts or discord. I'm sure you have a lot of worries about relationships and other things, but the simplest and most fundamental approach to making any of them go smoothly may be to first try adjusting the wavelength you are emitting. Parallel worlds and the soul of death are usually thought of as science fiction or spiritual topics. But if you take a step further and look at quantum mechanics, you can see clues to a fairly scientific explanation. At first, this theory may seem like a patchwork, but one day, when observations catch up, it may completely overturn our conventional wisdom. In this situation, if the world were to change dramatically through intention, what specifically should we do? It's said that a very simple action is the key. For example, try saying thank you. In the first place, saying thank you is also an act of confirming the wave of gratitude within yourself. And when you feel like you've been too hard on yourself, practice praising yourself. Practice changing Maruma's fault to thanks to it. Something as simple as that can result in the frequency body changing. Wouldn't it be incredibly interesting if that were possible? Out of the many waves of possibilities, which one would you choose to live your life on? You tune into the frequency and confirm the channel you want. Whatever the theory, I don't think this is a joke. I will also be looking back at what I learned today and putting it into practice. So I hope that you will also start doing what you can. So that's all for this time. If you found it even a little bit useful, please subscribe to our channel and click the like button. See you in the next video. Thank you for watching until the end. Good night. Earth. This world is too well made. Have you ever wondered why this world exists? When you look up at the night sky, you see countless stars. The Earth we live on is just one of those planets. But there are some mysterious numbers that may provide answers to questions such as how stars exist in the first place and why life originated here. Its name is the fine structure constant. In English, it is called a fine structure constant and is symbolized as alpha. The value of this constant is approximately 1/37th. It may not make sense at first hearing about it. However, if this fine structure constant had deviated from its current value by even a few percent, the stars we look up at and the life that was born on them might not have been able to exist. It is said that Dr. Stephen Hawking also believed that solving the secrets of 137 holds the key to understanding the fundamental laws of the universe. This time, we will be telling a grand story about the mysterious number law known as 137, one of the greatest mysteries in the universe. Good morning, Earth. Hello, this is Karamaru. Thank you for watching. This may be a bit sudden, but do you have a favorite number? Numbers are deeply connected to everything in our lives, society, nature, and even the universe. There are many mathematical laws in the world, and numbers in fortune-telling, and numbers are not just numbers. They often have some kind of meaning. You might think that there is no meaning in mere numbers, but in fact, in mathematics and physics, meaningful numbers are used as constants and are actually put to practical use. The numbers that come out of the rules certainly have meaning. This time, we will delve deeper into the mysterious synchronicity of the number 137, the fine structure constant, a number that many brilliant physicists throughout history have unanimously agreed is too amazing. This final boss-level theme of the laws of the universe is really interesting, so be sure to watch until the end. Let's go then. 137 is a number whose existence would cause the world to collapse. At the beginning, I said that without the fine structure constant of 137, not only would there be no human being like me or you watching this, but even the Earth and the starry sky would not exist. For example, stars maintain high temperature and high pressure conditions inside their bodies, causing nuclear fusion and producing heavy elements such as carbon and oxygen. These elements are nothing but important materials that make up our bodies. However, if the special value known as the fine structure constant were to change even slightly, the nuclear fusion mechanism that produces phantom elements would be disrupted, and the existence of stars could change dramatically. The types and amounts of elements produced in the universe will change dramatically, and elements essential for life, such as carbon and oxygen, will no longer be produced in the abundance they are today. A deviation of just a few percent from such a special value would cause a disruption of the world to the extent that it could reshape the very nature of the universe. It's not an important issue, is it? The true nature of the fine structure constant was first revealed in the 1920s during spectroscopic research on the hydrogen atom. German physicist Arnold Sommerfeld noticed that when he made detailed observations of the wavelengths of light emitted by hydrogen, there was a slight deviation from the theoretically predicted values. The reason for the discrepancy is that electrons move at about 1/37th of the speed of the Earth's atmosphere, which is affected by the theory of relativity. In short, the electrons move too fast and could not be explained by ordinary calculations. To explain this subtle discrepancy, a mysterious constant, the fine structure constant alpha, which is a number equal to 137, emerged. In physics, constants are used to explain the inexplicable, and it seems that the number 137 naturally emerged from this. However, even though no one in the physicists at the time understood what this number meant, they realized that there was a mystery lurking there that they could not turn a blind eye to. Meanwhile, when the British theoretical physicist Paul Dirac established the Dirac equation, which combined special relativity and quantum mechanics, the fine structure constant began to appear in a more definitive form. The number 137, which is naturally incorporated as if to say, "I'm here," is now understood to be a hidden pillar that controls the strength of the electromagnetic interactions that support the fundamental transformation of the universe in which current matter is optimally arranged, and that makes our world possible. In short, the world is somehow made up of 137. To us, ordinary people, this is just an odd number, but what do you think would have happened if this constant had been 150 or 120 instead of 137? The formation of stars and molecules would have been different, and we might have ended up with a different universe where life could not even have been born, completely different from the environment we live in today. Throughout human history, ancient people observed the movements of the stars, sun, and moon and sensed the order of the universe. and even felt a sense of mystery and fear in it. However, no one understands the deeper reason why a value of approximately 1/37 is so important, even considering modern prices. Well, for example, 0 represents nothing and 10 is the base of the decimal system. Also, pi such as 3.1415 is apparently an inevitable number that can be derived mathematically when circles are involved. But apparently there is no theoretical explanation for why 137 is this value. A slight deviation in the figures could lead to the collapse of the world. Scientists say that this delicate balance between these numbers feels like a kind of miracle or even the will of the universe. Just as people have been drawn to mystical symbols since ancient times, the number 137 also strongly stimulates the intellectual curiosity of modern scientists. In this way, the fine structure constant has become an important key at the forefront of physics. The world is too convenient. The root of this is the number 137, known as the fine structure constant. Now, let's delve deeper into the fascinating laws of the universe that physicists continue to obsess over. The number of gods that drove geniuses crazy. It's fascinating how mysterious scientists have been about the fine structure constant. Richard Feynman, a leading theoretical physicist of the 20th century, said the following about the fine structure constant. Anyway, it's a mysterious number that we don't really understand. I want to hang it on the wall and look at it every day. It may seem a bit strange to stick it on a wall, but Richard Feynman was a Nobel Prize-winning genius and is also famous for coining the term black hole. Even he was unable to theoretically deduce the value of approximately 1/37 and was stumped by this strange constant. Rather than boasting about his own achievements, he acted as if to declare that anyone who could discover the meaning of this alpha would be a true genius. Furthermore, Wolfgang Pauli, who is famous for Pauli's law, was also a physicist who felt the magic of 137. He was a great man who discovered Pauli's Rita principle, one of the great achievements of quantum mechanics, and received the Nobel Prize in Physics. He struggled for many years to discover the true nature of the atomic structure constant, and continued to study 137 throughout his life, but unfortunately, he never found a definitive answer. And the room number he was in when he died was 137. He left behind these words: "If I were to die and stand before the devil, the first thing I would ask him to do would be to tell me what these scores mean." It's truly a mysterious synchronicity, almost fateful. The fine structure constant is a mysterious number that truly captivates geniuses. Here's another interesting person. His name was Arthur Eddington, an astronomer. If God designed the universe, he must have written down 137 first. Eddington was convinced of this. He verified Einstein's general theory of relativity through color observations, and is also known as an important figure who introduced the theory of general relativity into the English language at a time when German scientific developments were not well known to the world during World War I. Eddington tries to solve the mystery of 137 somehow. He is a scientist who has even studied mysticism. Mysticism may seem like an unscientific approach, but in fact, in the mystical Kabbalah, the number 137 is considered a symbol of the imagination and is said to represent the fundamental energy of life and the universe. Eddington believed that the number 137 was not merely a product of chance, but rather represented a fundamental law engraved in the blueprint of the universe. First of all, let's think calmly. The biggest mystery is why the numbers 137 for a physicist and 137 for a mystic somehow match. A fusion of science and mystery. For example, in Kabbalah, Gematria, the numerical sacred language, each Hebrew letter is assigned a numerical value as a non-literal meaning. As 20th century thinker Jermischer points out, when this is applied to Kabbalah, it becomes 100 plus 2 plus 30 plus 5 equals a whopping 137. Kahara means knowledge that unlocks the mysteries of the universe. In other words, 137 can be said to be the number that truly represents Kabbalah. It's not that 137 appears in Kabbalah, but rather that Kabbalah itself is 137. 137 is also said to be related to the Tree of Life and the Tree of Sephiroth in Kara philosophy. and is said to be deeply connected to life, light, and imagination. It's a strange commonality, isn't it? Well, naturally, contemporary scientists didn't take this strange research, in which physical constants and mysterious numbers intersect, seriously, but perhaps it will turn out that modern science will be right to take this into account when conducting research. I don't know. Well, the reason why such giants of physics are so fascinated by this is because the fine structure constant goes deep into the very foundations of physics. Among these, the four cosmic interactions that ultimately constitute the elements that make up the universe are gravity, electromagnetic force, strong force, and weak force. Of these, it is known that the interaction of electromagnetic force has a major influence on the world around us. The reason why atoms, which are so hollow, can exist as matter in this world is because of the interaction between elementary particles through a force called electromagnetic recording. Without electromagnetic records, everything would break down at the elementary particle level. How strongly these electrons bind together is actually determined by the fine structure constant alpha, which is 137. So if 137 were larger, the bond with the atomic angle might be too strong, making it difficult for the atom to stabilize in its current form. Conversely, if it were smaller than 137, the atom might be more fragile, making it difficult to form molecules or complex compounds in the first place. Considering this, it is no exaggeration to say that the fine structure constant alpha is the golden number that supports the formation of matter and the constitution of life. Although many of the world's greatest physicists have tried to solve the mystery, there is still no clear answer to the question of why it is 137. Perhaps it was just a whim of God when he designed the world. Or perhaps there is some mysterious psychology hidden behind the theory. We are beginning to get a glimpse into why Feynman taped beautiful numbers to the wall. So how did our universe, which is supported by such divine numbers, come into being, and why did it have life? We will delve deeper into the mysterious and ambiguous boundaries of physics, showing how it is linked to mysticism and occult romance. 137. The intersection of science and mystery. The fact that the fine structure constant is 137th is so important that it influences the formation of the universe and the birth of life. Just knowing this fact is exciting, but there are still many mysteries surrounding 1/37. In physics, nature, ancient mysticism, and the world of numbers, 137 holds a hidden meaning that goes beyond strange coincidences. First of all, it is known that the golden angle for arranging the leaves and stems of many plants in nature is actually very close to 137 degrees. For example, if you examine the spiral patterns created by rows of seeds, pineapples, and pine cone fragments, you'll see that they are arranged at an angle of approximately 137.5 degrees. This is also known as the Fibonacci sequence and the golden cost, and the number they all have in common is 137. Even though plants are living organisms, it seems they have known the 137 degrees rule for hundreds of millions of years. I've been really into plants lately, so I'm a little happy about this, but strange synchronicities like this really do exist. It seems like the whole universe searched for a number that feels good, and everyone settled on around 137. Furthermore, even if we expand the scale to the universe, the number 137 appears in important places. For example, observations of cosmic microwave background radiation suggest that the age of the universe is approximately 13.7 billion years. This value has only been determined within modern cosmology, and the universe is only 13.7 billion times larger in the present day, so the number 137 itself may not have any meaning. However, when I learned that even the history of the universe up until the birth of mankind is connected to this number 137, I feel a strange connection. It's somehow fated that 137 is involved in the relationship between the universe and modern humanity itself. Physicist Richard Feynman is said to have predicted that the periodic table of elements would end at atomic number 137. This is because the electrons in the atom move faster as the atomic number increases, and it was thought that once the atomic number exceeds 137, the electrons would reach such high speeds that they could no longer exist. It's as if 137 is a special barrier that matter cannot overcome. And now the number 137 itself has some interesting properties. There are things called prime numbers in mathematics. This is a natural number that can only be divided by 1 and itself, such as 2, 3, 5, 7, 1, 1. But no matter how you write it, 137 is also a prime number. And 137 is known to be the 33rd prime number. Speaking of the number 33, it has some significance in urban legends. The number 33 is often considered special in religion because it coincides with the ranks of Freemasons and the angel number of the arts, and also the age at which Christ was pinned down. The overlap of the prime numbers 137 and 33, as well as other mystical numbers, has also amazed mystical people. Well, mathematically speaking, the fact that 137 is the 33rd prime number doesn't seem to have any great significance, but that little coincidence certainly adds to the romance of synchronicity. Furthermore, a lifespan of 137 years is often mentioned in the Old Testament. Abraham's Ishmael died at the age of 137, and Moses' ancestor Levi also lived to be 137 years old. Why did they all live for 137 years? It's a very mysterious question that raises the imagination. It is a fundamental constant that governs atoms and stars, yet it also appears as a symbol in the Bible and mystical thought, making it unique. So many mysteries have been added to the mysterious number of gods. But what will the solution to this mystery that scientists hope to bring us in the future? The simulation hypothesis and the behavior of the universe. Some say that if the world we see today is a virtual reality created by someone, then characteristics like the set value of 137 are reminiscent of the simulation hypothesis. The so-called simulation is a theory that highly developed intelligent life forms may be running a virtual universe inside a gigantic computer. The value of the fine structure constant is also one of the setting parameters they choose when running a program. For example, when simulating the universe as in creating a game, they enter the strength of gravity, the speed of light, and the strength of the electromagnetic interaction as alpha equals 137. I always think about the simulation hypothesis, but it gives me a strange feeling that I can't deny it. If it were possible to recreate a virtual reality that was no different from reality, it is said that statistically the number of simulated civilizations in the universe would be overwhelmingly greater than the number of civilizations in the real universe. So if this world were a simulation, it would be a universe with a setting value of 137. Alternatively, in the multiverse theory, which states that countless parallel universes exist, 137 may simply be a kind of lucky parameter that finds the universe in which life is born. Dr. Stephen Hawking has promoted the anthropic principle, which states that the reason our world is so convenient is that it appears as if it became a stable world by chance. But if there are many universes, it is inevitable that one of them will be conveniently formed and humans will be born. It seems that one type of universe that exists because there are so many universes would also include a simulation universe. It is a worldview that there are a huge number of universes, both real and virtual. Another interesting thing is that some researchers believe that the number 137 is an absolute signal when it comes to communication with extraterrestrial intelligent life. The biggest problem humans face when trying to send messages to civilizations on other planets is the difference in language and culture. Hello. Even if text messages such as SOS are transmitted directly over radio waves, it is not guaranteed that aliens will be able to decipher them. However, the fine structure constant is an absolute, dimensionless constant that does not depend on units. In other words, saying good morning, Earth might not make sense. But if a living being is aware of the laws of the universe just like us, then it should also be aware of the fine structure constant just like us. The microbehavior constant exists universally as a simple number that arises naturally from combinations of factors such as charge, velocity, and the Planck constant, without using Earth-specific scales such as mate and disease. In other words, 137th will become the common language for the blue officials to begin a dialogue across the stars. Well, it would be a little scary if we sent out too many radio waves and they were transmitted to Geki or aliens. After all, what would it bring us if physics were to completely solve the mysteries of 137? If modern physics could achieve the ultimate unification that combines quantum mechanics, the theory of relativity, and all four interactions in the universe, humanity might be able to conquer the universe. In the process, we may naturally derive the fine structure constant, etc. Because the fine structure constant is related to the behavior of the universe itself, it is said that there is a possibility that we may reach a realm where we can fundamentally redesign and reuse the laws that govern the universe. It may even be possible to mass-produce simulated universes. We may even see the development of technologies that manipulate free energy and even semi-gravity. Physics may seem like a distant world to us ordinary people, but it's a wonderful world where things that seem like science fiction can become a reality. It's thanks to these scientists that we are able to enjoy technology in this way. That is the great potential that the mystery of 137 holds. The number 137 is more than just a number. Although it has not been fully explained, it may be possible to obtain some kind of power by carrying it around or sticking it on the wall, like a power stone or the flower of life. I won't do it for now though. What is certain, however, is that this number has continued to inspire intellectual curiosity in physicists and many others. And it is certain that the 137 secrets will continue to push human science and imagination forward in the future. Well, numbers do seem to have some mysterious power, so if you happen to see 137 in your daily life or come across the number 137 by chance, it might be interesting to find a meaningful coincidence there. For example, I looked at the clock and it was 1:37. The amount on the receipt was 137 yen. Noticing such small coincidences can help improve your own powers of observation and sensitivity. This may lead to some inspiration in science or art, or it may even be an opportunity to re-examine your inner self. This may sound a bit exaggerated, but I think that in the end, the most important thing about fortune-telling and power stones is what state they put your mind in. Rather than distinguishing between science and mystery, perhaps by experiencing both, we can discover new ways of thinking and ideas. So that's all for this time. It was a grand story about space, and I'd be happy if you had any other thoughts or comments. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel or clicked the like button yet, I would be very happy if you would do so. Thank you for watching until the end. See you again in the next video. Good night. Earth, the reality unraveled by quantum physics. In this information society, which has advanced dramatically over the past 5 to 10 years, when we are able to understand and think together the concepts of various fields such as religion, philosophy, spirituality, agricultural science, quantum mechanics, and theoretical physics, we may be able to arrive at a common answer. If something like a collective value of humanity emerges even vaguely, the answer has psychology to it. I think that possibility is high. This time, we will talk about the mysterious possibilities that can be unraveled from the perspective of fishermen's fishing. Good morning, Earth. Hello, this is Karamaru. Thank you for watching as always. Have you ever wondered what on earth a Gyosho is and how mysterious it is? If you have even a slight interest in physics or spiritual matters, you may have heard the word Gyosho at least once. This research was also featured in the research that won the Nobel Prize in Physics in 2010, and in recent years it has become increasingly common to see it on television programs, in books, and in online articles. However, to be honest, quantum mechanics is complicated, and in everyday life, it tends to remain as a mysterious science that is hard to understand. However, there are many stories that show that connecting the essence of quantum mechanics with one's outlook on life and state of mind opens up shocking and exciting possibilities. Perhaps in the future this will become common knowledge among the general public. We introduce the probabilistic concept that the world is made up of good behavior. Well, the word fisherman itself is hard to understand because it's not something that people normally live. However, there may be information there that is close to psychology, and I think it would be difficult to understand at all. So I think repetition is important to hammer it into the human brain. This time, it will include things that have appeared in my past videos, but also some new concepts. So it will be a very interesting story, so I hope you will watch it and think about it. So let's go. the mysterious world revealed by quantum physics. The premise that quantum physics suggests that matter may not actually exist leads directly to the interpretation that life can be likened to a game, and that the reality before our eyes is actually a kind of integrated image of information. By mastering this interpretation, you may experience an unexpected improvement in your life. So first, let's talk about the basics of quantum mechanics. Quantum mechanics is a mysterious phenomenon in which two particles that are far apart, such as electrons or electron beams, appear to affect each other instantly. Common sense tells us that it takes time for information to travel, and according to Einstein's theory of relativity, no information can travel faster than the speed of light. However, in Lee's experiment, the surprising result was repeated in actual experiments, where the properties of one particle were determined the instant the other was measured, even when the two particles were far apart, such as between Hiroshima and London. This was widely reported as the violation of Bell's inequality, a research topic that won the Nobel Prize in Physics in 2022, and is now accepted as a given in the world of quantum mechanics. The keyword buff field is important in deepening our understanding of quantum mechanics. At the forefront of physicists, there is a theory that particles are merely spiritual states of a field, and that the all-encompassing field is the root of everything. This is called quantum field theory, and it's a cutting-edge theory in quantum mechanics. For example, it says that matter feels like it exists because of the flow of air in a field like a house, and when it recedes, it disappears. Well, the complicated stuff doesn't really matter. But what this theory tells us is that the vacuum that physics once spoke of is not just a space with nothing in it, but from the fisherman's perspective,